Think about the last time you looked at a medical diagnosis.
Oh, yeah. That is always a tense moment.
Right. Because there's this inherent expectation of like absolute precision. It feels almost like engineering.
Hmm.
You break your arm, the x-ray illuminates that jagged white line against a stark black background, and the doctor just points to it. The diagnosis is binary. It's broken or it's not broken.
Exactly. It's a very clean line of demarcation.
Yeah, and even when the news is bad, there is a profound psychological comfort in that clarity. You know exactly what the problem is, and you know exactly where the boundary lies between being healthy and being sick.
Well, that desire for categorization is deeply ingrained in how societies function. I mean, across the board. The human brain just craves that visible binary structure.
So sure.
Because when a threat can be clearly defined, it can be quarantined, it can be treated,
Hmm.
or, in darker historical contexts, it can be eradicated.
Right.
The terror only truly sets in when the diagnostic machinery fails and that line between the patient and the disease completely blurs.
Which brings us to the exact terrain you were stepping into when you opened Elise Kova's Dragon Cursed. It's a slow burn dragon romantasy. And almost immediately, that comforting x-ray machine just completely shatters.
Oh, it is obliterated in the first few chapters.
Literally, you are thrown into a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky, where the symptoms of a world-ending disease look suspiciously like the onset of magical power.
Yeah.
And the prescribed cure might actually be the mechanism of execution. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
The mission today is to completely deconstruct the dark, ash-choked reality of Kova's novel. You're going to explore a walled vertical city called Vinguard.
Which is such an intense setting.
It really is. It presents itself to you, the reader, as the final desperate bastion of humanity. It's this city holding out against two simultaneous apocalypses.
Right, because one apocalypse isn't enough.
Exactly. You've got this creeping necrotic rot eating the earth known as the Scourge, and then a terrifying onslaught of elemental dragons that literally rain elemental destruction from the sky.
It is an incredibly oppressive setting to navigate. And positioned right at the epicenter of this bleak reality is 18-year-old Isola Thaz.
And she's not your standard protagonist.
No, not at all. Isola is not your standard fantasy protagonist waking up to a secret destiny.
Yeah.
Her destiny has already been completely forced upon her.
Yeah, she doesn't get a choice.
She possesses these incredibly rare dual golden eyes. And because of those eyes, and because she miraculously survived a copper dragon attack when she was only 12 years old, the entire city of Vinguard essentially worships her.
It's wild. They literally call her Valor Reborn.
Yes, Valor Reborn. She is paraded as the prophesied savior, this legendary hero reincarnated, whose sole, world-altering purpose is to eventually slay the Elder Dragon and save humanity from extinction.
I mean, imagine carrying that psychological weight at 18.
It's crushing.
But Kova establishes this brilliant, agonizing hook right from the beginning. Isola is secretly terrified of the very beasts she is prophesied to destroy.
Okay.
Whenever a dragon appears, she doesn't feel some surge of heroic power. She experiences paralyzing clinical panic. She feels like a complete and utter fraud.
And honestly, who wouldn't?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the terror goes much deeper than just imposter syndrome. Isola is fundamentally terrified of her own biology.
This is where it gets so dark.
It does. Every single day, she relies on these illegal underground tinctures. They're brewed in absolute secrecy by her mother, just to suppress a terrifying array of physical symptoms.
Yeah, she suffers from bone-deep aches, a sporadically racing heart, and this severe sensory overload.
And in the world of Vinguard, those specific symptoms align horrifyingly with the onset of the dragon curse.
To understand the stakes here, you have to understand what the curse represents in this society. It is the ultimate terror. It's the belief that you might physically transform from the inside out into one of the monstrous beasts currently destroying your civilization.
Which is just a terrifying concept.
Absolutely. And the goal of this deep dive isn't just to walk you through the plot points of Isola's journey.
Right, we want to go deeper.
The objective is to pull apart the underlying mechanics of Kova's world. You will see a thorough deconstruction of the intricate and highly weaponized magic systems.
We're going to get really into the weeds on that.
Definitely. There will be an intensive analysis of the psychological manipulation engineered by Vinguard's religious and military authority known as the Creed.
And crucially, we will unpack the slow burn romantasy element.
Yes, because that's huge.
We'll examine how the romance itself serves as the primary vehicle for challenging and ultimately dismantling the protagonist's entire conditioned reality.
It really is the engine of the whole story.
It is. So To truly grasp Isola's internal terror, that suffocating constant dread of being a fraud who is hiding a terminal, monstrous secret, you have to first examine the external pressure cooker she inhabits.
The city itself.
Yes, you have to look at the architectural and sociological design of Vinguard itself. It is a city defined entirely by its constraints.
Because of the scourge.
Right. Because the scourge, this toxic rust-like rot, covers the earth outside. The city could not expand outward, so it built upward and it built inward.
The urban planning of Vinguard is just a masterclass in environmental storytelling.
Oh, absolutely.
When you visualize a typical fantasy capital, you might picture, sprawling plazas and wide avenues. Vinguard is the complete antithesis of that.
It's so claustrophobic.
Profoundly claustrophobic. It is described as a maze-like vertical slum characterized by narrow alleys that are barely wide enough for a single person to squeeze through.
Just a nightmare for anyone with claustrophobia.
Truly. The architecture is a chaotic jumble of layered rooftops where the streets frequently morph into short, precarious bridges connecting leaning towers.
And dominating this entire tangled skyline is the Grand Chapel of Mercy and its imposing Mercy Spire.
Which is terrifying in its own right.
Yeah. Every single architectural decision in Vinguard is dictated by the reality that death attacks from above. Dragons utilize the tallest structures as perches during their assaults.
Right, so the populace was basically forced to build inward, burrowing into the shadows to create this layered, deeply insulated terrarium of a city.
Okay, let's unpack this. That physical claustrophobia is the perfect structural metaphor for the ideological control exerted over the citizens.
Oh, 100%.
The physical walls of Vinguard exist to keep the dragons out, but the ideological walls meticulously constructed by the Creed exist to keep the people trapped in a state of perpetual compliance.
They are essentially trapped twice over.
Yes. The lore established by this religious order is rigidly, aggressively binary. They mandate a worldview where the universe is locked in a war between two opposing magical forces.
Light and shade.
Exactly. On one side, you have ether light. This represents creation, life, purity, and the inherent power of humanity. On the opposing side is ether shade. This represents destruction, the necrotic rot of the scourge, and the dragons themselves.
What's fascinating here is how the Creed's doctrine uses that simplicity. By dividing the world so cleanly into light versus shade, human versus monster, they eliminate any room for nuance.
Right, there is no gray area.
And without nuance, critical thinking becomes impossible. The Creed teaches that the dragon-cursed are individuals whose bodies have somehow accumulated too much ether shade.
Like a spiritual infection.
Exactly. According to this state-sponsored biology, the ether shade rots their human soul until their physical form inevitably follows suit, mutating them into mindless, bloodthirsty dragons.
And the institutional response to this diagnosis is where the true horror lies.
It is brutal.
When the Mercy Knights, which are essentially the militarized dragon-hunting arm of the Creed, identify someone who is cursed, or even just suspect someone of harboring the curse, they execute them.
Right out in the open.
But they have weaponized the language surrounding this violence. They do not call it an execution. They do not call it murder. They call it showing mercy.
That linguistic manipulation is just a textbook tactic of authoritarian regimes.
It's chilling.
It really is. By reframing a brutal execution as an act of profound mercy, the Creed achieves something terrifying. They turn the populace into active, willing participants in their own subjugation. Neighbors become informants, constantly monitoring each other for symptoms because reporting a loved one is framed as saving their soul. Paranoia is elevated to the level of civic duty.
Wow.
Now, place Isola within the sociological framework. The city has projected all of its desperate collective hope for salvation onto a traumatized teenager.
Who is already dealing with so much.
Right. The psychological weight of being Valor Reborn requires her to maintain a facade of absolute piety and fearlessness.
While internally, she is consumed by the terror that she is incubating, the very monster she is prophesied to destroy.
It's such a heavy burden.
Looking at the structure of this society, I keep coming back to the terrarium analogy, but it actually goes much deeper than just being trapped in a glass jar.
How so?
Well, if you build a literal terrarium and trap insects inside, you might occasionally tap the glass to watch them scatter. The dragon attacks function as that tapping.
Oh, I see.
The warning bells ring, fire rains from the sky, and the populace scrambles in terror. But the genius of Vicar Darius, the head of the Creed, is that he doesn't even need to be the one tapping the glass anymore.
Because the people do it for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He has conditioned the people inside the jar to police each other. The dragons provide the ambient external terror necessary to justify the authoritarian control, ensuring the citizens never look up at the Mercy Spire and question the institution holding them captive.
I would argue it goes even further than conditioning. It is an active symbiotic relationship between the institution and the external threat.
Oh, that's a great point.
The Creed actually needs the dragons. Without the terrifying reality of the beast, the necessity of the savior, and by extension, the authority of the vicar who guides her, completely evaporates.
And to be clear, Kova ensures that you, the reader, understand exactly why the citizens are so deeply traumatized. The dragons are not abstract threats.
No, they are terrifyingly real.
Early in the narrative, there is a visceral, horrifying sequence where a green dragon breaches the city's defenses, while Isola and her best friend Saifa are near the outer wall.
That scene is so intense.
It's a masterclass in sensory horror. This isn't just a giant lizard-breathing generic fire.
Right.
The green dragon exhales a highly corrosive acid that literally melts the heavy clay roof tiles as if they were sugar dissolving in boiling water.
And the gas.
Oh, the gas. Accompanying this acid is a dense, hallucinogenic green vapor. When a citizen inhales this gas, it doesn't just kill them.
It's so much worse than that.
It forcefully chemically induces their worst psychological nightmares in their final moments. You are reading about people dissolving in the streets while screaming at phantoms. The stakes of this world are agonizingly real.
The trauma inflicted by these attacks is profound and collective. Because the ambient paranoia and the threat of agonizing death are so highly elevated, the Creed has successfully institutionalized that fear.
They've weaponized it.
Exactly. They have channeled the society's collective trauma into a brutal coming-of-age ritual that every single citizen must endure to prove their humanity.
Which brings us to the tribunal.
Yes, leading us directly into the crucible known as the tribunal.
The tribunal is a masterclass in state-sanctioned torture disguised as a diagnostic tool.
That's the perfect way to describe it.
When a citizen of Vinguard turns 18, they are officially labeled a supplicant. They are legally mandated to undergo a grueling 3-week testing period.
Just weeks of pure torture.
Yeah. The publicly stated objective of the tribunal is to definitively prove that the supplicant is entirely free of the dragon curse. Only upon surviving and passing these tests do they receive their gilding.
To clarify the mechanics of the world for a second, the gilding is a magical, physical mark applied to the body.
Like a tattoo.
Sort of, but it operates essentially as a biological key, granting the citizen access to the city's magical font.
No.
Without the building, you are a second-class citizen. You're unable to join a guild, unable to become a mercy knight, and entirely dependent on the state for protection.
But the methods the Creed uses to test these supplicants defy any logical medical or diagnostic reasoning.
They make no sense medically.
Let's break down the specific trials Isola and her cohort face, because it strips away any illusion of the Creed's benevolence.
Let's do it.
In one of the initial tests, the 18-year-olds are locked inside a pitch-black, cavernous room. They are not fighting wild animals. They are fighting automatons.
These robot dragons.
Right. These are massive, terrifyingly precise, mechanized dragons engineered by the city's artificers, including Isola's own father.
Which is such a twisted detail.
It really is. These clockwork horrors aren't just for show. They breathe real, blistering fire. They project real, freezing ice. They're programmed to strike with lethal intent.
It's not a simulation.
No. Isola suffers a massive, gruesome laceration across her back, just trying to evade the silver automaton in the dark.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the inclusion of the automatons is deeply significant.
How so?
It demonstrates that the city possesses the technological capacity to synthesize the destructive power of the dragons.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The fact that they turn this immense technological achievement not outward against the beasts, but inward against their own youth, reveals the true priority of the Creed. Internal subjugation always supersedes external defense.
That is incredibly messed up.
And while the physical brutality is severe, the psychological warfare employed during the tribunal is arguably much more damaging.
Like the roof test.
Yes, consider the test involving the roof. In the dead of night, Isola is dragged from her bed by inquisitors, hauled to the exposed roof of a towering spire, and physically shackled to the stone.
They literally leave an 18-year-old girl chained to a roof overnight as live dragon bait.
Just left there.
She is completely exposed to the freezing, biting wind and the open, perilous sky. The inquisitors just leave her there, watching from below, waiting to see if a roving dragon will swoop down and consume her. Or if the sheer mind-breaking terror of the situation will force her hidden curse to finally manifest.
This specific trial completely strips away the facade of diagnosis. If the goal is merely to find ether shade, exposing a child to a dragon attack achieves nothing medically.
Right, it's just cruelty.
What it does achieve is the total destruction of the individual sense of autonomy. It teaches the supplicant that their body belongs entirely to the state to be discarded or consumed at the vicar's discretion.
Then there are the sundering pits, which is where the biological reality of this world gets incredibly dark.
Oh, the pits are awful.
The Inquisitors lock Isola and a young man named Lucan, whose massive significance we will unpack shortly, inside a small, poorly ventilated enclosed room. Placed in the center of the room is the massive, rotting skull of a green dragon. Their assigned task is to use crude axes to chop the skull into tiny, manageable pieces.
Which sounds like just gross manual labor, but...
But the biological mechanics of a decaying dragon in this universe are lethal. The skull is actively off-gassing the scourge.
Right.
This isn't just a bad smell. The scourge acts like an airborne, highly toxic rust. It fills the room, coating their skin, entering their eyes and filling their lungs.
They're breathing it in.
They're actively choking on this life-draining particulate, dying from acute exposure, while the Inquisitors simply lock the heavy door from the outside and wait to see if the massive dose of ether shade triggers a monstrous transformation in either of them.
When you analyze the structural design of these tests, the automatons, the exposure, the toxic off-gassing, a chilling reality emerges.
Yeah.
The tribunal is not designed to find the cursed. It is designed to manufacture them, or at the very least, to manufacture absolute, unquestioning obedience.
It's systemic trauma.
Exactly. It is systemic, generational trauma parading as religious necessity. The overarching goal is to completely break the psychological resilience of the youth.
And they isolate them, too.
Notice the intense isolation involved. Isola is forcibly separated from her mother. This is critical because her mother is a brilliant, analytical mind who is secretly conducting unauthorized research to find an actual cure for the curse.
Right.
By severing familial bonds and isolating the supplicants, the creed ensures that when the teenagers inevitably break, the institution is the only entity left to put them back together.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because looking at the logic of the tribunal, it mirrors the darkest aspects of historical witch trials.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Think about the ordeal of water, where the test for a suspected witch was to bind them and throw them into a river. The horrific logic dictated that if the person sank and drowned, they were innocent and their soul went to heaven.
Right, and if they survived.
If they miraculously managed to float and survive, it proved they were using dark magic, and they were immediately pulled out and burned at the stake.
Yep.
The tribunal operates on that exact same zero-sum cruelty. How is a human being supposed to pass a test that requires them to inhale toxic rust or survive a mechanized fire-breathing machine without using some extreme, potentially unnatural survival mechanism?
They aren't.
Starving teenagers and poisoning them doesn't prove their loyalty to the light. It simply proves how much cruelty a human body can endure before it fails.
The cruelty is the point. However, the tribunal is also the narrative crucible where the established rules of Koza's universe begin to fracture. The extreme stress does push Isola to her absolute limit, but the manifestation of her survival response completely contradicts everything the Cree has taught about the binary nature of magic.
Exactly. And the sequence in the Sundering Pits is where everything shifts.
That scene is incredible.
Isola and Lucan are on the verge of suffocating. The scourge is coating their lungs, and Isola reaches a point of absolute, desperate defiance. She refuses to be a martyr for the vicar's test.
Yeah.
In a moment of raw instinct, she scoops up handfuls of the decaying, toxic dragon guts.
Which is just so gross, but so cool.
Instead of recoiling, she uses the visceral fluid like chemical ink, rapidly painting a highly complex artificer's sigil directly onto the fabric of her own apron.
Right.
And then she does the impossible. She draws ether light. She channels raw, blinding magic through her own body, using the painted sigil to focus the energy and blasts the toxic scourge entirely out of the room, purifying the air.
It is a breathtaking moment of power and rebellion.
It really is.
To fully appreciate the magnitude of what Isola achieves in the pits, we need to delve deeply into the mechanical rules of magic in Vinguard.
The great lie.
The great lie that upholds the city. According to state doctrine, a human being cannot access the font, the vast, glowing well of raw ether light situated beneath the city, without first surviving the tribunal and receiving the gilding.
Right. The gilding acts as a biological USB port, allowing the citizen to interface with the font. But even then, the raw energy is too chaotic to use directly.
You need a tool.
Exactly. Citizens must rely on physical artificer sigils. These intricate geometric conduits, typically forged from specific metals by engineers like Isola's father, to safely channel that energy into a crossbow bolt or a reinforced shield.
But Isola bypasses that entire mechanical infrastructure.
She completely ignores it.
She is an anomaly that breaks the physics of her own world. Long before the tribunal even begins, she experiences these terrifying surges where she can draw raw ether light directly from the font.
Without the gilding.
Without the gilding and without a pre-forged metal sigil. In the sundering pits, she essentially hotwires the city's magic system.
That's a perfect way to put it.
She substitutes the highly refined metal of an artificer's tool with the biological matter of a dragon, using blood and guts as the conductive material, and uses her own sheer will as the circuit board.
It's unbelievable. The Creed's entire theological foundation rests on the premise that ether light is strictly the domain of uncorrupted, pious humans.
Right.
Yet Isola, who is exhibiting every physiological symptom of the dreaded ethershade curse, is capable of commanding ether light with more raw power and precision than the vicar himself.
This massive contradiction brings us to the most radical and highly illegal theory presented in the narrative.
Her mom's research.
Yes. Isola's mother has been utilizing her isolation to conduct autopsies on the remains of dragons killed by the Mercy Knights, meticulously studying the interaction between dragon biology and the scourge.
And what does she find?
Her research culminates in a paradigm-shattering conclusion. Dragons are not creatures born of ethershade. They are not the source of the rot.
Wait, really?
Yes. While they possess an inherent biological immunity to the scourge, they are fundamentally creatures of ether light, just like humans.
When you really process the mechanical implications of her mother's theory, it completely rewrites the reality of the curse.
It changes everything.
If dragons are entirely made of the same light, the same magical building blocks as human beings, then the dragon curse cannot be a dark, foreign rot invading a human soul.
Precisely. This requires a profound biological reframing. Consider when the symptoms of the curse typically trigger in a citizen.
Usually when they're in danger, right?
Exactly. It almost always occurs during moments of unendurable stress, sheer terror, or impending death, such as the deliberate starvation and torture inflicted during the tribunal.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
What if the curse is not an infection at all? What if it is an extreme evolutionary survival mechanism?
Oh, wow.
When the human body is subjected to a lethal environment like being overwhelmed by the toxic scourge or facing the agonizing pain of the automatons, the body's own native latent ether light might spontaneously mutate the fragile human form into something capable of surviving.
So it's protecting them.
Yes. It transforms soft flesh into impenetrable scales and fragile lungs into furnaces capable of processing toxins. The individual turns into a dragon not because they are evil, but simply to survive the unsurvivable.
That reframing is staggering. It's like discovering that a debilitating autoimmune disease is not your body attacking itself.
Right.
But rather your biology desperately attempting to mutate to give you the superhuman durability required to fight off a lethal environmental toxin.
That is a brilliant analogy.
But because the society you live in is fundamentally terrified of that mutation, they brand your survival mechanism as a monstrous disease, insisting that you must be executed for your own good.
The tragedy is that the human and the dragon are not diametrically opposed forces engaged in a cosmic war. They are two sides of the exact same biological and magical coin. They are kin.
Yeah.
And Kova does not just leave this as an academic theory. Isola experiences this profound, forbidden connection firsthand.
There is a sequence that beautifully and tragically illustrates this connection.
The rooftop scene.
Yes. During a massive, coordinated dragon assault on the city, Isola is forced out onto the exposed roof of a monastery. The sky above Vinguard is absolutely swarming with beasts.
It's total chaos.
In the chaos, a massive yellow dragon crash lands directly onto the edge of her roof, its immense weight spiderwebbing the heavy stone beneath its claws. It is a moment of pure cinematic terror. But then, the expected violence doesn't happen. The yellow dragon doesn't unleash a torrent of fire. It doesn't attempt to devour her.
What does it do?
It simply lowers its massive head and stares directly into Isola's dual golden eyes.
Wow.
In that suspended moment, the air between the teenager and the monster literally begins to spark and hum with raw, shared ether light. They are non-verbally communing.
That is incredible.
The dragon looks at her not as prey, but with total recognition. It is acknowledgement of shared substance.
The creature senses her latent power. It recognizes the familiar resonance of the font within her. In that brief communion, the ideological wall built by the creed entirely collapses. Isola sees a sentient being, a kindred spirit, trapped in a monstrous form.
But the brutality of Vinguard does not allow for that nuance.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of this profound, paradigm-shifting moment of connection, a massive ballista fired from the towering Mercy Spire slams into the yellow dragon.
Oh, that is so heartbreaking.
It brutally cuts the creature down mid-communion, and as the dragon dies, slipping off the edge of the crushed roof, it maintains eye contact with Isola.
Oh, man.
The look in his eyes isn't animalistic rage. It is a look of betrayal, almost asking, how could you let them do this to us? It is an incredibly haunting, heartbreaking image.
It really is the emotional turning point of the narrative, because the moment you intellectually accept the shared humanity buried within the dragons, the entire moral architecture of Vinguard collapses.
Right.
Every heroic kill by a mercy knight becomes an act of murder. Every execution framed as mercy is revealed as a horrific tragedy. This realization fundamentally alters the stakes of the story, setting up the devastating character arcs that follow, particularly concerning the betrayals Isola faces and the complex, slow-burn romance that defines the latter half of the book.
Well, let's transition into the psychology of the people surrounding Isola, because the character dynamics in Dragon Cursed are layered with incredible tension.
They really are.
We have to start with Sypha. Sypha is Isola's fiercely loyal, fiercely determined best friend. She represents the absolute ideal citizen of Vinguard. Sypha is a true believer. Her singular driving goal in life is to survive the tribunal, receive her gilding, and follow in her father's footsteps to become a Mercy Knight.
She wants to be the hero.
She genuinely believes that slaughtering dragons is the highest moral calling, the only way to protect the people she loves.
Sypha's psychology is vital to understanding the efficacy of the Creed's indoctrination. She is not a bad person.
No, not at all.
She is a deeply motivated individual operating within a completely fabricated moral framework. She has internalized the binary of light and shade so thoroughly that her own self-worth is entirely dependent on her ability to enact violence against the monsters.
And standing in stark contrast to Sypha's zealous clarity is Lucan.
Ah, Lucan.
Lucan is an incredibly complex figure. He's the adopted son of Vicar Darius. His physical appearance is striking. His face and chest are covered in deep, jagged scars from a childhood dragon attack. Throughout the grueling tests of the tribunal, Lucan constantly shadows Isola. He acts as her physical protector, repeatedly putting his own scarred body in harm's way to shield her from the automatons and the inquisitors.
Right.
Yet, simultaneously, he wears the crimson robes of a curate. He is a high-ranking member of the very religious institution that Isola is terrified will eventually drag her to the execution block.
This raises an important question because the juxtaposition of Sypha and Lucan creates phenomenal narrative tension.
Oh, absolutely.
You have Sypha, the purest believer in the system, and Lucan, the scarred enforcer of the system, who secretly subverts it to protect a supposed heretic.
Yeah.
This tension inevitably snaps during the final, culminating test of the tribunal, held publicly in the city's grand arena.
The arena sequence is absolutely devastating. The supplicants have been starved, sleep-deprived, and psychologically tortured for weeks.
They are just running on empty.
They are pushed into the sand of the arena in front of a stadium filled with cheering citizens. The extreme, unendurable stress is designed to finally break someone.
And someone does break.
Right. But it isn't Isola. It is Sypha.
Oh, it's so tragic.
Right in the middle of the stadium, the curse suddenly and violently triggers within the truest believer.
Yeah.
Isola has to watch in horror as Sypha's body begins to catastrophically swell. Thick blue scales tear violently through her human skin, and her skeletal structure snaps and reforms.
It happens so fast.
Within moments, the girl who wanted nothing more than to be a Mercy Knight has transformed into a massive, terrifying blue dragon, instinctively exhaling blasts of freezing ice in panicked self-defense.
It is the ultimate manifestation of tragic irony. The system's most ardent defender is biologically forced to become the system's ultimate sin.
Exactly.
Sypha is not a monster in that moment. She is a terrified, traumatized teenager whose body enacted an extreme physiological defense mechanism against the torture inflicted by her own government.
But they don't see it that way.
No, but the Creed's binary worldview cannot process that reality.
The response from the institution is immediate and merciless. The Mercy Knights stationed around the arena immediately opened fire with heavy crossbows.
And this is where it gets really dark.
And the most gut-wrenching detail is that Sypha's own father, a decorated Mercy Knight, is among them. He raises his weapon and shoots a specialized poison bolt directly into his newly transformed daughter.
Just unthinkable.
Isola, completely abandoning her own safety, sprints out into the chaos of the arena. She desperately reaches out with her raw ether light, trying to recreate the communion she experienced on the roof, pleading with the blue dragon, trying to pull Sypha's human consciousness back to the surface.
Does it work?
And there is a microscopic, agonizing moment where it almost works. The dragon's vertical slit eyes widen, and Isola clearly sees a flash of Sypha's vibrant human green eyes looking back at her, terrified and trapped.
Oh, man.
But the poison takes hold, the knights continue to fire, and they slaughter her right there in the sand.
The murder of Sypha in the arena forces a complete structural reckoning.
It really does.
It definitively proves that the line between human and monster is entirely fabricated. The Creed's definition of mercy is exposed as the systematic eradication of their own traumatized children.
Yeah.
And this catastrophic dismantling of Isola's worldview immediately cascades into the massive revelation regarding Lucan's true identity.
So what does this all mean for the romantasy aspects? Because this is where Kova elevates the genre.
Oh, completely.
The romance is intrinsically tied to the world building and the trauma. We discover that the jagged scars covering Lucan's body are not the result of merely surviving a dragon attack when he was a child.
No, it's so much more complicated.
The truth is infinitely more complicated. Lucan is the dragon.
He is the copper dragon.
Yes, he is the specific copper dragon that breached the city 6 years ago. The exact same beast that terrified 12-year-old Isola, spared her life, and left the searing burn on her chest that triggered the mutation of her golden eyes.
That is just a wild reveal.
He is a dragon-cursed individual who, through sheer willpower and perhaps the unique nature of his connection to the magic, miraculously managed to suppress the mutation and regain his human form. And upon shifting back, he was secretly captured, adopted, and studied by Vinguard, essentially becoming a captive weapon of the state.
When you analyze this from a psychological perspective, the implications are staggering. Lucan is the boogeyman hiding in plain sight. The very creature that inflicted the foundational trauma of Isola's life, the beast that haunts her every waking nightmare, is the same young man who has been quietly holding her hand and bleeding to protect her in the dark of the automaton's labyrinth.
It's a lot to process.
It forces Isola to confront the physical manifestation of her deepest fear, not as a mindless monster, but as a deeply traumatized, fiercely protective ally.
The execution of this slow-burn romance is phenomenally tense. We talk a lot about the enemies to lovers trope, but this pushes that concept to its absolute psychological limit.
For sure.
It is an enemies to lovers arc where the love interest is the literal embodiment of the protagonist's PTSD.
That is so true.
Imagine the psychological whiplash Isola experiences. She looks at the raised white scars crisscrossing Lucan's face and chest, and the horrifying puzzle pieces finally snap together.
Right.
She realizes he was there on the rooftop 6 years ago, not as a fellow victim cowering in the ash, but as the towering, fire-breathing apex predator whose gaze irrevocably altered her destiny.
The tension is incredible.
The emotional friction of navigating that terror, realizing his profound gentleness as a human, and falling in love with him anyway, provides an incredibly rich, complicated romantic core to the story.
It serves as the ultimate form of exposure therapy.
Wow, yeah.
By learning to love Lucan, Isola is forced to stop viewing the dragons, and by extension, her own latent curse, as inherently evil. The romance is the mechanism through which she finally unspools the Creed's indoctrination.
And by the time this realization solidifies, Isola is a character who has been entirely stripped of her tethers to the society of Vinguard.
She has nothing left.
Her mother was dragged away by inquisitors and executed during a chaotic dragon raid. Her father, the brilliant artificer, was quietly assassinated almost certainly on the orders of the vicar to manipulate the mechanics of the tribunal. Her fiercely loyal best friend was biologically forced into a monstrous form and publicly executed by her own father. Isola has literally nothing left to lose.
The illusions are gone.
Which means the narrative hurtles toward a monumental climax.
The trajectory of the story shifts significantly here. It evolves from a narrative of personal claustrophobic survival into a massive story of structural revolution.
Yes.
And the catalyst for this revolution begins with an infiltration from the outside world.
Following her desperate attempt to save Sypha in the arena, Isola is branded a dragon sympathizer and thrown into the deepest cells of the chapel.
Right.
Lucan, fully turning his back on his adoptive father, orchestrates a daring jailbreak.
Ugh.
But he doesn't pull it off alone. He brings in outside operators, a faction known as the Ashborn.
The introduction of the Ashborn completely shatters the geographical and sociological lies of Vinguard.
How so?
Throughout Isola's entire life, the Creed has preached a very specific doctrine regarding the world beyond the towering walls. They claim that the outside world is an absolute, unsurvivable apocalypse.
Right.
Anyone who attempts to live out there is either instantly rotted by the scourge or mutated into a mindless half-dragon abomination. It is the classic authoritarian tactic of using the threat of the terrifying other to enforce compliance at home.
But the people who breach the walls to rescue Isola, a pair of incredibly skilled twins named Mila and Ember, and a gruff, pragmatic fighter named Dasney, are completely aggressively normal.
They're just people.
They don't have scales, they aren't rotting from the inside out. They are just rugged, resourceful human beings who have figured out how to survive in the ash-choked wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Their mere existence is undeniable proof that the Creed's narrative of an inescapable apocalyptic wasteland is just another fabricated mechanism of control designed to keep the populace too terrified to ever look beyond the gates.
With the Ashborn securing her release, Isola refuses to flee. She makes the conscious decision to confront the architect of the suffering.
She goes right for the vicar.
She marches directly into the heart of the institution, the Grand Chapel of Mercy, to face Vicar Darius. And this confrontation is where Kova delivers the ultimate subversion of the world's mythology.
This sequence requires a complete rewiring of everything you thought you knew about the lore.
Oh, buckle up.
For centuries, the religious foundation of Vinguard has been built on the prophecy that Valor Reborn will one day rise to slay the Elder Dragon, the mythological apex beast that supposedly leads the hordes against humanity.
Right.
When Isola finally breaches the inner sanctum of the chapel, the vicar uses his mastery of the magic to forcibly connect her directly to the raw, unfiltered power of the font.
Mm-hmm.
Through this massive surge of magic, Isola is plunged into a vision of the ancient past. She witnesses the truth of the original Valor. And the revelation is staggering. The Elder Dragon is not a separate evil entity that Valor fought.
The original Valor is the Elder Dragon.
The history taught by the Creed is a complete inversion of reality.
To understand how this happened, you have to look at the architectural reality of Vinguard. Earlier, we discussed how the city's vertical claustrophobic design was purportedly a defense mechanism.
Right.
The truth is infinitely more insidious. The entire city of Vinguard, the sprawling alleys, the placement of the spire, the foundations of the chapel, was meticulously constructed as a massive, citywide artificer sigil.
Wait, really?
Yes, it is a gigantic magical circuit board. And its purpose is horrifying. It was designed to constantly, imperceptibly siphon the latent ether light, the literal life force, from the thousands of citizens trapped within its walls.
Oh my God.
And funnel all of that concentrated power into a single conduit, Valor.
When you realize the city is just a machine, the whole picture snaps into focus.
It does.
Valor attempted to absorb the collective life force of an entire civilization. But that sheer, incomprehensible volume of raw magic was too much for human biology to process.
It broke him.
It fundamentally twisted him, permanently mutating his human form into the colossal, undying monstrosity known as the Elder Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And the terrifying reality of the present day is that Vicar Darius has deciphered this ancient architecture. He has usurped control of this massive parasitic city sigil.
He's using it.
He is actively channeling the twisted, corrupted magic of the Elder Dragon, artificially blending the pure ether light with the necrotic ether shade to elevate himself to the status of a living god.
It was never about saving anyone.
The Vicar's grand plan never involved Isola slaying a beast. He needed Valor Reborn because her unique, frictionless connection to the font makes her the perfect biological battery.
Right.
He intends to hollow her out, steal her connection, and solidify his absolute dictatorial power over the magic itself.
If we synthesize this thematic climax, the political and sociological commentary is incredibly sharp.
It really is.
This is a story about authoritarian resource extraction. The greed and the lust for power of a few men were always the true danger. Vinguard is not a sanctuary.
It's a trap.
It is a literal parasite feeding off the vital energy of its own people. The dragons outside the walls, the creatures the citizens have been taught to fear and hate, are largely just the tragic victims of a fundamentally broken, exploitative magic system.
Yeah.
The true monster does not have wings or scales. He sits comfortably on a gilded altar in the center of the grand chapel.
Thinking about analogies, it is like realizing you aren't a desperate passenger huddled on a life raft hoping to be saved. You are actually the biological battery being slowly drained to power the engine of a massive warship that you are trapped inside.
Exactly.
The institution framing itself as your savior is actually the mechanism of your consumption.
It is a profoundly harrowing realization, and it instantly forces the narrative into a desperate, chaotic escape sequence. The vicar unleashes the full corrupted power of the font against them.
The cinematic scale of the escape is incredible. Isola, Lucan, and the Ashborn are pinned down in the chapel. To save the woman he loves, Lucan makes the ultimate sacrifice.
What does he do?
He stops fighting his nature. He fully surrenders to the curse he has spent years suppressing.
Right there.
Right in the middle of the crowded city square, surrounded by screaming citizens and armed mercy knights, he undergoes a massive, agonizing transformation back into the towering, fire-breathing copper dragon. Isola and the Ashburn scramble up the razor-sharp scales onto his massive back, and with the thunder speed of his wings, he launches them into the sky, desperately fleeing the parasitic city.
But the institution does not let its batteries escape easily. The Mercy Knights immediately mobilize, manning the massive anti-air ballistas mounted along the defensive walls.
And they are incredibly accurate. High above the blighted, ash-covered earth, a massive iron bolt fired from the city walls slams directly into Lucan.
Oh, no.
The impact shatters the complex bone structure of his right wing. They immediately lose altitude, spiraling out of control. As the copper dragon plummets, Isolus is violently thrown from his back. She is in absolute freefall.
Just falling through the sky.
The wind is tearing at her. The dark, scourge-infected earth is rushing up to meet her, and she is moments away from death. And in that moment of ultimate, inescapable terror, the exact physiological trigger for the curse, her body finally responds.
The survival mechanism kicks in.
The survival mechanism activates. But as the scales erupt from her skin and her bones snap and elongate, she doesn't transform into a copper dragon like Lucan, or a blue one like Seifa, or a green one.
Right.
Isola transforms into something that has never been recorded in the history of Vinguard. She becomes a magnificent, terrifying red dragon.
The specific physiological details of her transformation are vital to understanding the thematic resolution of this story.
Oh, definitely.
Her scales are described as a deep, vibrant crimson. This perfectly matches the exact visual description of the toxic scourge that coats the earth.
Okay, that's interesting.
Furthermore, as she takes her first breath in this new form, the vapor she instinctively emits is not corrosive acid, and it isn't freezing ice.
What is it?
She exhales a massive cloud of a non-lethal, uniquely modified version of the scourge itself.
Wow.
This strongly suggests that Isola is not merely reacting to the environment, she is fundamentally adapted to it. She represents a true synthesis, a perfect biological balance of the creative force of Aetherlight and the destructive reality of Aethershade.
That's amazing.
She is not a monster, she is a completely new evolutionary step.
I just have to pause and appreciate how brilliantly Kova pays off the title of the book, Dragon Cursed.
Right.
Isola spent 18 years terrified of her own body, suppressing her symptoms, believing that the curse was a terminal illness that would strip away her humanity. She spent her life dodging the diagnosis. But in the final, desperate moment, the curse was the exact mechanism that allowed her to survive the fall. The curse was the key that allowed her to physically break free from the parasitic prison of Vinguard and take to the sky.
It is an incredibly satisfying and sophisticated use of established fantasy tropes.
Yeah, totally.
Kova takes the very traditional, almost mythological concepts of the Chosen One and the Dragon Slayer and completely subverts them.
She flips them upside down.
She uses this framework to conduct a deep exploration of institutional gaslighting, the historical weaponization of religious dogma, and the deeply radical, difficult act of finding empathy and shared humanity with the very monsters society demands that you destroy.
When you look at the entire arc of the story, the journey is just breathtaking. You begin following a terrified teenager, huddled in a claustrophobic, rain-slick alleyway, suppressing a cough and terrified of her own shadow.
Yeah.
And you end the experience free-falling through a massive, broken sky, experiencing the visceral liberation of transforming into a mythical apex predator. It is a phenomenal ride that completely shifts your perspective on what a monster actually is.
And as we conclude this deep dive, there is a lingering, highly provocative concept that the text leaves us to wrestle with.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want you to consider Isola's new existence as the Red Dragon. She is coated in crimson scales, and she actively emits a version of the Scourge. But crucially, the text notes that generating the Scourge feels natural and powerful to her.
Right. It does not burn her lungs, does not rot her flesh. Her biology embraces it.
Which forces a massive revaluation of the world's ecology. What if the Scourge that is aggressively consuming the Earth outside the walls isn't a necrotic disease at all? Think about the revelation that Vinguard is a massive magical parasite, actively draining the life force of the land and its people to feed the ambition of men like the Vicar.
Okay.
What if the Scourge is actually the Earth's violently misunderstood immune response?
Oh my God.
It might be the planet's equivalent of white blood cells, aggressively multiplying and blanketing the Earth in a desperate attempt to suffocate and eradicate the parasitic magic of the city.
That is wild.
If Vinguard is the true infection, the Scourge might be the planet's only viable cure. And if that ecological theory holds true, the profound tragedy is that the only way to genuinely heal this broken world isn't to kill the dragons or fight back the rot.
Right.
The only way to save the world is to stop fighting and let the Scourge consume the parasite entirely.
Wow. Let the Earth heal itself by allowing the fever to burn down the infection?
Yeah.
That reframing is incredible.
Really recontextualizes everything.
We started this deep dive talking about the comfort of a clean medical diagnosis, looking for that sharp line on the x-ray.
We did.
And we end up realizing that the diagnostic machine itself was rigged from the start. Isola didn't need to find a cure for her curse.
Mm-hmm.
She just needed the courage to realize that the society trying to heal her was the actual disease, and her supposed monstrousness was the cure she had been searching for all along.